Now I would like to introduce this wonderful panel that we have sitting here. So I'd like to start with Annadabodi, whom I've known for a long time. And Annadabodi has lived as a Buddhist monastic in the forest tradition for over 25 years, and her practice is guided by the early Buddhist suttas with an emphasis on meditation, study, and integrating the liberating teachings into daily life. And I know her personally, and we both serve on the Teachers' Council at Spirit Rock. Delighted you're here. And sitting next to Annadabodi is Norman Fisher, who is a poet and a Zen Buddhist priest. He's a former co-abbot of the San Francisco Zen Center and is founder of the Everyday Zen Foundation, a network of Dharma groups and related projects. His latest Dharma book is The World Could Be Otherwise, Imagination and the Bodhisattva Path. Wonderful, wonderful to have you here, Norman. And I had the privilege to teach with you many, many years ago at a retreat, and I've missed you ever since. And to his right is Richard Dixie, whom I've had the pleasure to meet today. And Richard has been a student of the Dharma since early 1970, trained in both the Tibetan and Theravadan traditions. He was the director of the Bioelectronic Research Unit in London for 14 years and is an advisor to the Khyentse, am I saying it right? Khyentse Foundation and a senior instructor at Dharma College, Berkeley. Welcome, Richard. And Gail Fronsdal, sitting at the end. Gil has practiced Zen and Vipassana since 1975, and he has a PhD in Buddhist Studies from Stanford. He's the founder and primary teacher of the Insight Meditation Center in Redwood City, California, where I also teach, and Gil has been a friend and mentor to me for many, many years. I'm delighted you're here, Gil. So, and I don't know if I was introduced or not. I'm Nikki Murgafori, and I'm both an empowered teacher in the Theravada tradition, and I'm also a nerd, an AI scientist. I wear a couple of hats, so I'm delighted to be here. So let's start with the word, actually, the translation, the common translation of the word nibbana or nirvana in the suttas is enlightenment. But there are so many other translations, so many other synonyms. I personally prefer awakening, as I've shared already, awakening, as well as freedom. There's also liberation, the unconditioned, destruction of greed, hatred, delusion, the other shore, the peaceful, the sublime, the deathless, the island, the refuge, and many more from Samyutta Nikaya 43. So let's start with what does nibbana, awakening, enlightenment, or whatever synonym you prefer, what does it mean to you? And let's start with Annadabodi, if you wish.
Thank you. So I also would lean away from the word enlightenment and liberation, awakening, freedom. These are words that have more meaning for me. It's pretty central to my life, I would say. I would say, when I first came across the Buddha's teaching, I was looking to learn to meditate, to help manage a very depressed mind. This is in my early teens. And when I actually read the Buddha's teaching, the Four Noble Truths, it was such a powerful, it was almost like an inner revolution happened. And what shifted for me was a sense of a shift from being a stuck person, who was born, is going to go through a lifetime, and at some point is going to die, to a possibility of awakening in the present moment. And it was such a powerful revelation that could be possible. Because the previous the previous framework I had was more Christian framework, which is that, you're born, you go through your life, you do good things or you do bad things, or you do a bit of a mix of both. And then at the end of your life, you either go to heaven or to hell. And that felt like a bit of a difficult setup for me. I wasn't feeling too hopeful about heaven, honestly. So this teaching of the Buddha, that awakening can be found here and now, was profound and really changed my life, as you can see. And so I think when I first came across that idea, there was a sense of it was something out there, something wonderful that I would get one day. And I even remember having an image of like some little beautiful being floating on a lotus up there somewhere. That was my idea at age 14, of enlightenment or of awakening. And then over the years of aligning to the teachings, there's this sense of it's in a way it's our birthright. It's what we're born with. It's waiting to be rediscovered. And so for me, awakening is the potential that we all have, that we get distracted from and we forget and we doubt and we get obscured because of our mental habits and so on and actions. But it's waiting to be realized by each person in this room and each person outside of this room. So that's what it means to me.
Thank you. Norman.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here with all of you. I don't think the word enlightenment is a fair translation of nibbana or any of the words used in the texts. But I think the reason why it's the most popular word in the West is because of I guess it was the 18th century Enlightenment period, which was a period where people thought no more having to believe in doctrines that are dictated to us by others, by the church. We can think for ourselves. We can discover something for ourselves. We can be, it was a dark period, the dark ages. We can be now in the light. So that's a good idea. I like that idea. And so I think that idea actually pervades the reception of Buddhism in the West, that we think of it that way. We think of it as not being about doctrine. If the teachings are valuable, and I think we would all agree that they are, it's because we confirm them in our lives, in our own experiences. Anyway, in advance, Nikki sent out a bunch of questions, and I dutifully wrote answers to them. So I will now read you the answer. What does awakening mean to you? That was the question, right? Here's the answer.
Go for it, Norman.
Yeah. It means practice, unswerving devotion to practice for the benefit of others. It means fearless unselfishness. That's my answer.
Thank you. And I also appreciate what you brought in about our enlightenment predating Buddhism and thinking for yourself. Now I'm going to have actually a deeper appreciation for the word enlightenment. Thank you for that. Yeah, Richard.
Yes, so there's another translation of nirvana. I think it's quite interesting. A vana is a prison, and nirvana is to be free of the prison. And the question is, what is this prison that we're caught in, that we need to be free of? And this really comes back, I think, to the heart of what Buddhism is. Because I think at the heart, Buddhism is a real direct inquiry about experience and about what it means to have experience. We've talked a lot about peripheral items today. I think now we're really going to talk about the real essence of what Buddhism is about. And the vana we're caught in is something we don't expect. That's why we can't see it. If we could see it, we'd break it, we'd get free, but we don't. For example, put your hands up if you think you're here now. You see, you're not. You're in a memory of now. It takes about 400 milliseconds to generate. We have it in our language. We call it recognition. Recognition. Oh, there it is in the language. And we're living about 400 milliseconds behind events. Always. All the time. In fact, our awareness is refreshing between 8 and 12 times a second. So if you just think about that, that means that 8 to 12 times a second, a display is generated for us based upon actual events, but actually recognized. And within that gap is a prism. Now, when you look at the numbers, it's really rather alarming. If you think, okay, 12 hours a day, 12 times a second, 60 minutes in the hour, 60 minutes in the hour and 60 seconds in the minute, it comes up to about 500,000 cognitive events per day, per sense gate. We've got 6 sense gates. That means it's 3 million prison events happening every day for our entire life. And not surprising, our attempts to be mindful successfully, which might number in the 10s, maybe 20s, perhaps even 100s, are overwhelmed by the reality we're in. And it's my belief that that is what the Buddha was addressing. He was addressing the cognitive prison we call the here and now. And so the joke is when people say, remember, be here now, they're actually repeating the mantra of the prison they're in, not the freedom from it. And it's understanding that is the essence of the path. I think it's probably the essence of all religions, actually.
Thank you, Richard. We'd love to come to back to that later, but for now, we're just going to go down the line for the first question, and then we'll mix it up. Gail, please.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that a lot because I get the sense that here and now is overemphasized, that it's kind of held up. Sometimes it's kind of like the Buddhist God or something. It's being, they're all great, and that's where everything good is supposed to be. I teach people to be in so-called here and now, but I think that we have to be careful not to overrate it. And I think this word nibbana or nirvana points to something that's more valuable, more important than the here and now. And I myself prefer to think of it as an action noun. It's not a thing or a place or a reality, but rather it involves an action, and it's an action of release. And that's my favorite way of rendering the word nibbana, is as release. And it's a profound form of letting go of the prison that we're in, the attachments we have. And that the path of practice that I've gone through has been a progressive series of letting go of releases. And I think that one qualifies as something like, maybe like enlightenment. I'm not sure what it is, but that when that release is so strong and so palpable, that it gives us a first-hand experience of a different way of living, a different way of being, one that's not self-centered, one that sees the possibility of dwelling without attachments, without greed, and without hate. And that experience, maybe those things still live in a person, but the experience of being freed from those are so strong that it becomes a palpable reference point that begins working us and changing us and helping us move further into the possibility of release. And I think that our whole system is set up, our psychophysical system, if you tune in well, or if you sit and get really quiet, it's set up to want us to move towards that release. Because not to move in that direction is to stay suffering.
Thank you, Gail. So, as a follow-up to that, and to make the conversation more personal, how do you feel that you have changed through decades of practice, both Zen practice and Theravada practice, in the ways of emptying and letting go? If you can share personal stories or anecdotes, that'd be lovely. And this then will become open to everyone.
Okay, so there's another element to this which has to be understood before you can get to an understanding of release. I'm not talking to you now. Sounds a bizarre statement. But if you, when you're talking, look at yourself as you're talking, you realize that's actually true. We are not doing what we think we are doing. We're totally different from what we think we are. So the display that we live in has a displayed actor in it, which you remember is me. But we have a faculty, and this is where the possibility arises. We have a faculty to see. And if we look, we see there is no actor. Something else is going on. The words are coming out now, for example, but Richard Dixie isn't saying them, not at all. And this is true for all of us. It's really straight in front of our faces. Now, whatever that is can be relied on. You find yourself relying on something you don't identify. It's really quite remarkable. It's a true refuge. All the refuges that you can identify are going to let you down. I can tell you that now, because they're just concepts. They are put together ideas. But this refuge, which you can't identify, is totally reliable. And you find yourself relying on a capacity that you don't identify, which turns out to be who you are. Now, this is a strange realization. Perhaps we are 400 milliseconds in front of who we actually are. And all we have to do is rely on who we are, and then something else happens. Now that reliance is the realization that one can talk about.
What do you think about that, Norman?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think practice has improved me.
Couldn't care less.
It has made me far more aware of all the ways in which I should improve. But it really, I can't say, you know, I used to be this terrible person, and now I'm a really wonderful person. I can't really say that. In a way, I mean, I think actually that everything we can say about all of this stuff, to me, seems quite paradoxical. In the sense that I think I could say, and it would really be true, I haven't changed at all through 40-some years of practice. I think I could really say that, and it would be a true statement. I think I could also say I've changed a lot. However...
That's very Zen of you, by the way.
What?
That's very Zen of you.
Well, no, it's not Zen. It's just a fact. You know, it's just the truth. Now, the thing is that, so if I've changed a lot, what changed me? Well, probably everything. So I can't attribute the changes that have occurred in my life to my practice necessarily. It must have been a factor, right? But also I got older. That would have changed me anyway. I mean, you were always, all of us, changing anyway, right? We're changing anyway, and we hope we're all improving. Any intelligent person who would like to be decent, we hope, is improving over a lifetime of just being alive. So I think it's quite paradoxical, but I think, like, as I said in the beginning, the main thing is that I'm much more aware of all the ways in which my smallness manifests. And I happen to be a person who's married for many, many years, I think 43 years maybe. And that's where I can tell in my intimate relationship to my spouse that I haven't really improved much. And she will point this out when the occasion arises. So that raises then a further question, like why do I persist in doing this all this time?
Gail would love to hear your comment.
I'm not sure what to say. You want like a little detail of maybe example of how I changed, or you want something a little bit bigger?
Anything, take it anywhere you like.
Well, the little detail was that I think it represents a change. Was some of my deepest kind of release that I had was in my time in Asia and Burma. Before I went there, I worked at Green's restaurant. And when I came back from there, I worked at Green's restaurant. And the people there said that when you came back from Burma, before you went, it was a mess around everything you were cooking. And when you came back, it was clean.
Lovely. Thank you. So next I have a question specifically for you, Annadabodi, that I want to start with, and that is, I know you've spent time with some highly realized beings, and if you would love to share.
Thank you. I have been very fortunate to have had contact with some, very wonderful practitioners, and the one that really stands out for me, which I love to talk about him, and I'm really happy to be able to sit up here and speak about him, because I hope I can give a little transmission of his being. He's passed away now, but his name is Venerable Mahagosananda. I actually want to cry when I say his name. And he's a Cambodian monk, very, very beautiful, very highly realized monk, who I was fortunate to meet 3 times in my life, and each time was completely life-changing for me. And he was, the qualities that he lived, he exuded, were humility, playfulness, almost like a light. It was almost as though he had a light shining from him. You could put him in, if he was in a dark room, he would just illuminate it all on his own. Very, very intelligent and very simple at the same time. He had a certain genderlessness. He was male, but he kind of was very feminine. And he was old when I met him, but he was almost like he could have been 3 years old. So all of these qualities. And one of the things that really struck me very deeply, many things that struck me, but reflecting on his life, and that he came from Cambodia. He was actually in Thailand practicing as a monk when the atrocities happened in Cambodia, and he wanted to go back to be with his people, and his teacher said, no, stay here, keep practicing, and then you'll have something really valuable to share with your people. And he did that, and he went through enormous grief, and somehow came out the other side with this incredible radiance and love and joy and responsiveness. And every member of his family were killed during the Khmer Rouge time. So he was somebody who had a lot of reason to be bitter, to be angry, to be resentful, and there wasn't a trace of that in his being. There wasn't a trace of greed or a trace of hatred in him. And it's very rare to meet someone like that. And when you do, it kind of blows your mind. It's different to any other experience. For me, it's like I've never experienced anything. Maybe also being with the Dalai Lama, he has a similar clarity.
Thank you for that exquisite transmission. I start to feel like I'm being cooled as you were talking about it. I'd like to direct this question to Norman and Gil because they have worked with a lot of students in lay conditions, and now sort of people that you've seen and worked with who've been your teachers. Now the question is, the inquiries about people that you have seen their progress throughout their years, towards the decades, and how you've seen them change for the potential of this practice. So, Norman, Gil, whoever wants to go first, take it away.
People that I admire the most, actually, the people that I would tell stories like this about, are people that I've been practicing Zen with, regular people, right, for decades, who are able to bear their illness and death with dignity, who are able to be a support for their families, who are able to be humble and simple and live their lives. And they're not as impressive, actually, from the outside as some people who have been produced by 1,000 years of Buddhist culture, which is a marvelous and amazing thing. But I think for us now, to me, it's just as impressive. Because the world we live in is, quite difficult, and it doesn't provide the Western world, and now increasingly outside of Buddhist communities in Asia, the Asian world too is very troubled. So I don't think we want to be saying that these great practitioners are the ideal to which we aspire, because we will never get there. However, there is an ideal to which we can aspire, which is to be, really kind, humble people, truly, unselfishly willing to be of service to one another. And we actually can be, I was really moved by what you were saying a moment ago, that our smallness might arise, but we don't have to be persuaded by it, as I'm sure you're not, most of the time. Sometimes, but a smaller percentage of the time, I'm sure, than when you were young, So we can, I think we can, that I think is quite realistic, quite possible, and in fact, I actually feel like it is that kind of awakening, and I would consider it to be a valuable kind of awakening, is really available, I actually think, to anybody who would practice seriously over a long period of time, because it takes discipline, it takes commitment over time. But I think if that's awakening, and I feel it is, a kind of awakening that's quite valuable, then we can all aspire to that kind of ideal. And so I don't have any problem celebrating the great sages and teachers who we've met in our lifetime. But if we think it's about them and not about the practice that produced them and the whole world that made it possible for them to achieve what they achieved, then we're going to get mixed up in our own practice. We're going to practice, and we're going to be really disappointed that we're not the Dalai Lama. And then we're going to give it up because, I'm still the same schlump that I was before, so why bother? No, I think we have to be clever about this and think about it more and realize that in each context, awakening is going to appear differently.
And I also appreciate another way that I hear that is really the ordinariness of awakening, really the ordinariness of it, not to put it on a pedestal, which my hope is, demystified in a way. The idea of freedom, awakening, it's not something that's just reserved for a few. but it's available in so many different shapes or forms. It's available to us in daily life, in lay life. Gil, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I like that, the ordinariness. I usually don't use the language of enlightenment or stages of awakening or things like that. If I use anything comparable to that, I like the word maturity, that people mature in the Dharma. And people mature in many different ways, but absolutely, I've seen many lay people mature to a great extent. And it's been quite inspiring to me to see students mature and grow and develop and unfold. The question of lay versus monastic, I think that lay practitioners have just as much, if they practice sincerely and dedicatedly, and have just as much opportunities for the kind of deep experiences of release, of freedom or letting go, as a monastic does. But the disadvantage of lay life is that it's too easy to get back, come out of that experience and get swept up in the concerns of everyday life. So the experience of letting go or release doesn't remain close by to be a guide or support or reference point to mature further from that vantage point. And so I think the art of it in lay life is to whatever degree of letting go has been significant and meaningful, is to somehow keep that alive as the path of practice, is to keep maturing and developing through that.
Thank you. The next question is, I'd like to start with Norman first, because you have written about compassion extensively. So is the relationship between awakening and the cultivation of compassion and love, whatever word you want to put on that too.
Well, to me, they're the same thing. Alexia gave a talk earlier about gender and so on, and she mentioned that she studied at Cal with Professor Lancaster, and I did too, around the same time. And I remember that he gave a seminar on reading the Emptiness Sutras. We were specifically reading the Diamond Sutra in Chinese. Not that I could read it, but I was trying to learn how to read it, and he was reading it with us. And I remember him saying, well, in Mahayana Buddhism, they always say that wisdom, the ability to understand the emptiness of all phenomena, wisdom always goes together with compassion. They say that. Wisdom and compassion always go together. He said, frankly, studying these sutras all this time, I don't see that. I don't see what that has to do with compassion. But I believe them when they say it, so okay. But I don't get it. I remember him saying that. And now, all these years later, it just seems to me like so obvious that it's the same thing, because if you are willing to not be mesmerized by your own smallness, however much it appears, if you're willing to recognize all the really interesting things Richard was talking about, that the reality that you are one step removed from yourself all the time, that you are not at all who you think you are, if you're willing to acknowledge all of that, then it means that everybody and everything else is you. You're not this guy over here, right? You're not that guy over there. Everything and everyone else is you. And in this very wonderful way, because if it weren't for everybody and everything else, think how lonely you would be. It wouldn't even be possible for you to be here. So naturally, you love them all. And naturally, when they fall down, you try to pick them up. And probably you end up falling down too. But that's okay, then both of you are down there together, and it's not so difficult. So yeah, I think that I was telling Gil, and I was very happy earlier when I told Gil this, that he didn't think I was crazy. Gil actually knows stuff about Buddhism because he's a scholar. I make stuff up with a little bit of knowledge that I have from sutras and stuff. But I was saying to Gil, I said, here's my outrageous idea. My outrageous idea is that actually the Buddha really taught a life of compassion and conduct. The practice is really about how we treat one another and how we love one another. That's really what it's completely about. However, and because previous to that, everybody was stuck. Who was saying? You were saying. We all thought we were stuck in our situation that we were born into. We walk down this block and then we fall off the edge, and that's it. And that's how everybody felt. But the Buddha said, no, actually, there's another possibility. You don't have to. You're not stuck with that. There's another possibility, and it's this life of transformed conduct and love.
Thank you, Norman. So given that we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to give every panelist a chance to share one last thoughts about this topic, and maybe the way I would pose the question is, given everyone that is here and what you've experienced, what you know, what you've seen, what you've studied, what would you like to leave the people in this auditorium with? And let's start with Gil at the end.
I think that the most important thing I'd like to say here on the topic of enlightenment is that enlightenment, whatever it is an ethical state or an ethical experience. That there's an equivalence of ethics and enlightenment. That, and the easiest way to describe that is that, at least in the ancient texts, the suttas, enlightenment is described as the most common description of nibbana is the destruction of greed, hate, and delusion. The most common description of the roots, the fundamental foundations, the roots out of which unethical behavior arises, is greed, hate, and delusion. As greed, hate, and delusion is diminished, it makes us more ethical, makes us less unethical. And to take that all the way to its full potential, as we move towards that full potential of really the destruction, the ending of greed, hate, and delusion, we're uprooting and eradicating the sources within us for being unethical. And without being unethical, then we can live in the world with care and attention and respect, and also with a wonderful sense of amazement that we're here and conscious.
Thank you. Richard?
Actually, as we were talking, I think it's probably correct to say that compassion is the body of wisdom. Everything has a body, right? It's important to distinguish between understanding, experience, and realization. And one of the biggest problems we have as practitioners is we tend to think when we understand we've realized. That's the first thing. So you get the idea of it, you think you've got it all. And then when you have experiences, you think you've realized as well. And that's even more common. And experiences are going to happen because if this is indeed a display, and you start playing around with the controls, the display changes, and you have experiences, and you think, wow, I'm getting enlightened. No, you're not. You're just playing around with the controls on the TV screen. That's what you're actually doing. And so experiences are sudden, like a flash of lightning. But realization is like the dawn, coming up slowly. And I really think it's important to realize that we have to accumulate. We have to, the Tibetans have a very nice term. They don't use the term meditation, they use the term gumpa, which basically means to become familiar with, is essentially what the term means. We have to accumulate something. And that takes time. Once you've understood what it is, then experiences become an obstacle. Because if you reify your experiences as something to follow, you're reifying the very display you want to escape. So actually experiences, it's a very nice metaphor, experiences are like saliva. It feels good in your mouth, but when you spit it out to show it to someone else, it doesn't look so nice on the floor. And it's a bit like that. So the important thing is to realize that you will have experiences as you meditate, but the best thing to do is to forget them. Because the realization is something quite different, feels totally different, and comes slowly and steadily. And once you start feeling it coming, you know you're on the path.
Purifying the mind through meditation, through that awareness of the smallness, through hanging in there, through bearing with, when you are holding back from wanting to do harm or wanting to do something that's going to hurt you or others in the present or in the future, there's a purification of mind that happens then. I think we can hold a very high idea of what we should be good, we should be always nice, we shouldn't have any bad thoughts, but it's more like to know the purification process and know that that's part of the practice and that's part of what ripens us in awakening.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank you, Annadabodi, Norman Fisher, Richard Dixie, and Gil Franzel for having agreed to be part of this conversation. And thanks to all the organizers for inviting us to be part of this conversation. Thanks to all of you for your interest, for being engaged. May all beings be free. May all beings enjoy the taste of awakening, which includes us. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.